Zilpha Lowery vanished without a trace in 2008. Lewis Stratton slipped quietly out of town the same week. For 10 years, no one connected them until a hidden cave in the mountains revealed the horrifying truth that would unravel a cold case and expose a killer hiding in plain sight. Zilpha Lowery was a quiet, solitary woman in her early 40s who lived alone in a modest one-story home nestled at the edge of Marion, a small North Carolina town surrounded by woods and winding back roads. She wasn't the type to attract attention. She kept to herself, went to church on Sundays, and worked as a secretary at a local law office. Her days were built on routine, always punctual, always predictable. She walked the same path to her car each morning, arrived at the office precisely at 8 a.m., and returned home before sunset. That's why, when she failed to show up for work on October 12, 2008, her coworkers immediately knew something was wrong. At first, they thought she might have been delayed. But by mid-morning, calls to her cell phone went straight to voicemail. A colleague drove past her home during lunch and noticed her car was gone, but her porch light was still on. That evening, when she didn't return home and no one had heard from her, her cousin reported her missing. Authorities began their investigation. The next morning, there were no immediate signs of forced entry at her house. Her bed was made, breakfast dishes were neatly placed in the sink, and her usual handbag was missing. Her phone, keys, and wallet were presumed to be with her, as they were every day. Nothing suggested she left in a hurry or had plans to go anywhere unusual. By the end of the second day, her car was discovered parked just off a gravel road near the entrance of a remote hiking trail nearly 20 miles away. This discovery was baffling. Zilpha wasn't an outdoors person. She had once told coworkers she was afraid of getting lost in the woods. The interior of her car was clean and undisturbed. Her purse was on the passenger seat, and her phone was found beneath it, turned off. The keys were still in the ignition. The only odd detail was that the driver's seat had been pushed back farther than someone of Zilpha's small stature would. Need. Search teams and cadaver dogs combed the surrounding forest for days, but the dense trees and uneven terrain made progress slow. No footprints, clothing, or signs of a struggle were found. A local river ran near the trail, and authorities feared she may have fallen in, but no evidence supported that theory. People began to whisper that she had left on her own, maybe overwhelmed by stress, or perhaps had taken her own life. But those who knew her pushed back. Zilpha had no history of depression. She had no debts, no recent trauma, no secrets. Her life was quiet, uneventful, and ordinary. Weeks passed with no new leads. Flyers bearing her photo were taped to windows and telephone poles, but calls to the tip line went nowhere. The forest held its silence. What had happened to Zilpha Lowery remained a mystery one that left her community uneasy, and her loved ones haunted by unanswered questions. As the weeks turned into months, the case of Zilpha Lowery's disappearance grew colder. The trail had gone quiet, and without any new evidence, police began to revisit every detail from the beginning. One name kept resurfacing: Darren Pope. He was a fellow employee at the law office where Zilpha worked, and he had been the last person known to have seen her on the morning she vanished. His background raised red flags. He had a prior conviction for burglary from over a decade earlier, and although he had stayed out of trouble since, the stigma followed him. Detectives began to look closer. Darren had always seemed uneasy when asked about Zilpha. He said she came into the office that morning as usual, appeared distracted, and left just before lunchtime without explaining where she was going. That version of events didn't sit well with investigators. If Zilpha had planned to leave early, why didn't she tell anyone else? Why didn't she call ahead to cancel the rest of her workday, something she was known to do even for minor schedule changes? Darren's inconsistencies became more apparent with each interview. On one occasion, he said she was carrying her purse when she left. On another, he said he wasn't sure if she had anything with her at all. Small contradictions, but enough to keep suspicion alive. A search warrant was issued for his home and vehicle. Investigators hoped to find something, anything that could tie him to Zilpha's disappearance. During the search, police found an old work jacket in Darren's garage that seemed similar to the one Zilpha often wore. It was smudged with what looked like dried blood near the sleeve. There was immediate excitement within the department. Could this be the break they needed? Could the jacket have been Zilpha's? Lab testing was fast-tracked. In the meantime, Darren was unofficially treated as a person of interest. Though no formal charges were filed, the media caught wind of the development and began reporting that police may have found a key piece of evidence in the case. Speculation spread like wildfire. Public opinion quickly turned against Darren. Though he maintained his innocence and cooperated with authorities, his reputation was destroyed almost overnight. He lost his job, was shunned by neighbors, and even received threats. For many, the case was already closed in their minds, but then came the lab results. The jacket was not Zilpha's. The blood on the sleeve was from a deer, likely from hunting or roadkill cleanup, both common in the area. DNA from the inside of the jacket confirmed it had only been worn by Darren himself. Investigators were forced to admit the jacket had no connection to the missing woman. The case once again returned to square one. No evidence, no body, no answers. Darren Pope, though cleared by forensics, would never fully clear his name in the eyes of the public. And the mystery of what happened to Zilpha Lowery remained as dark and unexplained as ever. 5 years after Zilpha Lowery's disappearance, her case had become little more than a sad memory in the quiet town of Marion. Most believed the trail had gone cold for good. The flyers were long gone, the news coverage had faded, and her name was no longer on anyone's lips. But in the summer of 2013, everything changed with a discovery made entirely by accident. 2 local teenagers were exploring Cold Hollow Mountain, a heavily wooded area a few counties away from where Zilpha's car had been found in 2008. They were looking for rumored caves hidden deep in the forest's secret spots people claimed were used by moonshiners decades ago. After hours of climbing over rocks and weaving through thickets, they stumbled upon a narrow opening behind a curtain of ivy. Inside, the space widened just enough to crawl into. Curious, they ventured in with nothing more than phone flashlights. Unaware of what they were about to find. At first glance, the cave looked like an abandoned shelter. There were old blankets, a couple of crushed food cans, and a pair of rusted boots. It smelled of damp earth and mold. But as the boys moved deeper, inside, one of them noticed something beneath a pile of rocks and leaves, a strange shape, almost like a bundle wrapped in plastic. They didn't touch it. Instead, they hurried out of the cave and called the local sheriff's department. Forensic investigators arrived the next day. The bundle was indeed something sinister. Carefully unwrapped, it revealed a body wrapped in a faded green tarp. Time and moisture had taken their toll, but several personal items were still intact, including a hair clip and a necklace. The remains were sent to the state medical examiner's office, and within days, the dental records confirmed what no one had dared to hope or fear. It was Zilpha Lowery. The confirmation brought a wave of shock through the town. After 5 long years, she had been found but not alive. Her disappearance had officially become a murder case. An autopsy revealed a single blow to the skull, likely from a blunt object. It was a quick, brutal strike that killed her instantly. She hadn't been moved after death. The cave had been her final resting place since the day she vanished. Detectives from the original case were called back to review the scene. There were no signs of animals disturbing the body, which meant the cave had remained untouched all those years. The most chilling detail was how deliberately the body had been hidden. The location wasn't easy to find. Whoever had brought her there knew the area well and had expected her never to be discovered. In the renewed investigation, forensic teams examined the tarp and personal items for DNA. That's when they made an unexpected find on the door handle of Zilpha's abandoned car. Stored in police custody since 2008, a fingerprint had gone untested. Technology had improved, and now, a partial print could lead somewhere. What was once just another dead end was suddenly a potential breakthrough. And for the first time in years, the case had new momentum. The partial fingerprint found on Zilpha Lowery's car door was run through the national database. Within days, a match came back: Lewis Stratton. His name had never come up in the original investigation. He wasn't a known associate of Zilpha. He hadn't worked at the law office. He didn't even live in Marion at the time of her disappearance, at least not officially. Detectives quickly realized they were dealing with someone who had passed beneath the radar, someone who had blended into the edges of the town before vanishing just as quietly. Lewis Stratton had lived in a neighboring county for less than 6 months in 2008. Records showed he'd worked briefly for a contract cleaning company that serviced small businesses in the region, including the law office where Zilpha worked. His stint there lasted only a week before he was fired. The reason wasn't documented, but a call to the cleaning company confirmed he had been let go after a complaint. That complaint, they said, came from a female employee at the law office. Digging through old personnel records, investigators found a note in Zilpha's file. It was a short memo she had written to the office manager about a cleaning crew member making her feel uncomfortable. She didn't mention him by name, but she said he stared too long and made strange comments. At the time, it hadn't seemed serious enough to pursue. The cleaning company was simply asked not to return. That man, it now appeared, had been Lewis Stratton. This connection, though circumstantial, gave detectives reason to look deeper. Stratton had left North Carolina not long after Zilpha's disappearance. He had relocated to Georgia under a different name and had managed to stay off the radar ever since. His criminal record included only minor offenses: trespassing, shoplifting, but nothing that suggested violence. Still, his sudden departure, the fingerprint on the car, and the unreported incident with Zilpha all pointed to something darker. Police traveled to Georgia to locate and question him. They found him living in a rural area, working construction jobs under the table. When approached, he was cooperative but visibly anxious. He denied ever meeting Zilpha Lowery and claimed to have never visited Marion beyond 1 or 2 routine jobs. He said he had no idea how his fingerprint ended up on her car. He chalked it up to a mistake or coincidence. Investigators didn't buy it. They obtained a search warrant and began combing through his belongings. What they found was subtle but telling: an old folded map of the Cold Hollow Mountain region with a faint mark near the area where the cave had been discovered. No explanation was given for why he had the map or why it was marked. Back in North Carolina, forensic testing on the tarp that had been used to wrap Zilpha's body revealed another crucial piece of evidence: a small piece of hair trapped in the fibers. DNA analysis showed it belonged to Lewis Stratton. That, combined with the fingerprint, the timeline, and the map, gave police enough to build a case. The walls were closing in. After years of mystery, the identity of Zilpha Lowery's killer was finally coming into focus. With the mounting evidence against him, Lewis Stratton was brought in for further questioning in late 2018. He was no longer just a person of interest. He was the prime suspect in a murder that had haunted a community for over a decade. The investigators, now armed with forensic results, map timelines, and his own contradictory statements, confronted him with everything they had. Stratton initially denied everything, insisting the fingerprint must have been transferred somehow and that the DNA on the tarp had no explanation. But his calm exterior was beginning to crack. Investigators took their time. They laid out the chain of evidence piece by piece: the fingerprint on Zilpha's car, the cleaning job that put him in her office for 1 week, the complaint she had made that got him fired, the sudden relocation after her disappearance, the hidden cave near Cold Hollow Mountain where her body had been found. the map with a marked location in his belongings, and the DNA on the tarp that had wrapped her body for 5 years. It was a web that had taken 10 years to build, and now it was tightening around him. Faced with the undeniable truth, Stratton eventually gave in. His confession came slowly, without emotion, almost as if he were talking about someone else's actions. He admitted he had been angry after being fired from the cleaning company. He felt humiliated, embarrassed, and blamed Zilpha for reporting him. He had seen her around the office, watched her routines, and decided to confront her. That confrontation happened on the morning she disappeared. He followed her from the office parking lot after watching her leave early. He hadn't planned what would come next. She drove to a gas station, then began heading down a quiet road that led out of town. He continued to follow at a distance until she stopped near a wooded turnout, possibly to take a phone call or fix something in her car. That's when he approached her. Stratton claimed the argument escalated quickly. She recognized him, and when she told him to leave her alone, something inside him snapped. He picked up a tire iron from the back of her car and struck her once in the head. She collapsed instantly. Panicked and unsure of what to do, he dragged her body into her own car, drove nearly 20 miles into the cold hollow woods, and hid her in a cave he had stumbled upon weeks earlier. It was remote, dark, and unknown to most locals. He wrapped her in a tarp he found discarded nearby and covered the body with leaves and rocks, believing no one would ever find it. For years, he lived with the knowledge of what he had done, changing his name and avoiding contact with anyone from his past. He convinced himself the case would never be solved. Lewis Stratton was charged with first-degree murder and later sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Zilpha's family, the confession brought long-awaited closure. The investigation, slow and grueling, had finally brought justice. And in a small North Carolina town, the name Zilpha Lowery would no longer be just a mystery. It would be remembered as a story of perseverance, tragedy, and truth uncovered. No matter how long it took,